Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookish Babbles, the podcast where we reread our favorite books and chat about them. I'm your host, Alyson, and without further ado, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 10 of Bookish Babbles. We are in the double digits. Woo! And we are at the end of Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Today we're talking about chapter 30 and the epilogue. So next episode will be a wrap-up / final thoughts episode, and I'm going to have my friend Gabby on the show to talk about Ballad. I'm so excited, not only just to have her on the show, but because it'll be the first time where I can just, talk to someone about this book, spoilers and all, and because most of my friends who've read The Hunger Games with me back in the day, haven't read Ballad yet, and, I hope that in the months leading up to the movie, more of them will read the book and we can chat about it, but yeah, I'm really excited to talk to Gabby and record next week's episode. And before I really dive into the episode, just in case no one's heard the news, but we have our Percy Jackson, guys. Percy Jackson has been cast for the show. Oh my god. So the kid from the movie with Ryan Reynolds, was it The Adam Project? Walker Scobell? Think that's how you say his name. Yeah, he's our Percy. I haven't seen the Adam Project, but I need to watch it now because apparently he's really good in it. But oh my god, I can't believe this is really happening. Because I was 12 years old when the movie that shall not be named, the Irrelevant movie adaptation, came out too. So I have been waiting years to have a good on-screen adaptation of Percy Jackson. I thought it would never happen. I kept hearing rumors for years, but oh my god, it's real. We have our Percy. I may have cried a little when I heard the news drop, and then I was just elated for the rest of the day. Someone check up on me when the casting for Annabeth is announced, because I will be so much worse than I am today. So yeah, I will not be okay when the trailer drops, or the rest of the cast is announced, and I will be insufferable when the first episode premieres. So oh my god, I can't believe it. And I've not seen this kid act yet. I have not heard him speak, but already, if anyone gives this kid shit, I'm ready to fight them. Anyway, I need to talk about Ballad, otherwise I'll just keep gushing over my excitement for the Percy Jackson series. But anyway, what was I talking about? Right. So, speaking of cast, still waiting for the cast of Ballad to be announced. I need to know who Lucy Gray is. I need to know who's playing Sejanus and Jessup so I can start simping over them. Oh man, I'm so sorry for everyone listening right now. I'm all over the place. Anyway, I should stop. I need to start this episode before I say anything more embarrassing than I already have. Okay, so last week, the group, as in the Covey and Corio and Sejanus, they take a Pleasant Lake trip. Corio shows what a backstabbing snake he is. Alyson is re-traumatized by Sejanus' death. Yes, I spoke in the third person. Lucy Gray and the Covey sing a whole bunch of songs. Coriolanus did a murder, and to avoid being killed, he and Lucy Gray make plans to run away. This week, Coriolanus gets into officer school but can't go. Wah, wah. He and Lucy Gray go back to the lake, and things don't go well. And then the book ends. Okay, so with all that being said, let's dive into chapter 30. Okay, so this chapter begins... Oh, hi, Ray. There goes my dog. So this chapter begins right where the last one left off. Commander Hoff... Bless you, Ray. Commander Hopp tells Coriolanus that he passed his officer exam and will be leaving for school the next day. His scores were so good that he's been recommended for elite officer training in District 2. This, of course, is the worst time for Coriolanus to hear this news because, it should be amazing news, but he can't go. Because, he could be found guilty for murder any day now, and, he doesn't want to be executed for that. So now he's even more salty about having to run away and live in the woods. Because, going to elite officer school is a great way to gain power. I do wonder, and spoiler alert for the ending, I guess, but I do wonder, even if he had been linked to the murders, do you think Dr. Gall would have saved him? Because from reading the end, we know that Gall purposely made sure that he became a peacekeeper for the summer, but wouldn't let him stay out there because she basically has plans to mold him into the kind of person she wants him to be. And even if Coriolanus had been caught for the murder, I'm pretty sure Gall would have pulled strings and, swept it under the rug. Because even though Mayfair is the daughter of a mayor, he's the mayor of District 12, which is the quote-unquote joke district to the capital. Ultimately, the capital doesn't care what happens to Mayfair. I mean, look what happens to Madge in this trilogy. Still not over it. Billy's death would be even less relevant and even more easier for them to sweep under the rug because in the grand scheme of things, they wouldn't matter to the capital. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. But anyway, so basically what I'm saying is I don't think Coriolanus' life was ever in any real danger because of the murders. Lucy Gray, on the other hand, yes, she was in trouble. Anyway, so Coriolanus leaves the base through the weak spot in the fence that Sejanus told him about. He heads to the hanging tree and finds Lucy Gray wearing the orange scarf. She also has a small wagon with supplies. She greets him with a hug and a kiss, and he feels a little less salty about having to run away. He tells her the very romantic line, "You're all that matters to me now." But personally, I just think he's trying to convince himself that this is a good thing because, he feels like he had no other choice. Lucy Gray confesses that she doesn't think she's brave enough to do this on her own, that after a couple of days she'd return to the covey on her own. And I do really like how the story acknowledges the magnitude of running away like this and how hard it would really be. And it's scary. Because in so many stories, teenagers who run away, it's almost like it's no big deal to them. And this feels realistic that they have doubts and that it's scary to them. And I know in Catching Fire, Katniss makes plans to run away at one point because, Snow plans on killing her and her family any day now. But I don't know, it doesn't feel as daunting because we know Katniss has the ability to survive in the wild. She can hunt, gather, start a fire, and survived in a forest arena with people actively trying to kill her on national television. So, running away into the woods for her sounds easy by comparison. So, Lucy Gray isn't quite as survival savvy as Katniss, though she's still pretty skilled. She knows where to find food, she knows how to start a fire, and, she too survived a Hunger Games. Coriolanus, on the other hand, he can sort of use a gun, and has no other survival skills that I'm aware of. Except being able to climb a rope, I think. So yeah, only reason these two are running away is out of desperation. Lucy Gray has to kind of convince herself that the covey will be okay without her. I disagree. They were a hot mess when she was in the capital. They didn't work or perform at all while she was gone. And she doesn't even tell them she's leaving. She sees Tam Amber right before she left that morning and told them she was gonna look for a goat or something. So she doesn't even tell them she's leaving, which I think she probably does because, the less they know about where she is, the safer they are when everyone ultimately will start looking for her, especially the mayor. But at the same time, if she just leaves and they have no idea where she is, that's almost worse, maybe. When she was in the capital, they at least knew where she was, and there was the hope she would come back. And as she's running away to go north, they have no idea where she is and no idea when or if she'll come back. And Lucy Gray's just in a really terrible position, and I'm not entirely blaming her, but I'm not sure she thought through the whole like leave and not tell the cubby thing. We also learned that after the show, the previous night, the commander told Lucy Gray not to perform the hanging tree anymore, claiming the song is quote unquote too dark, but all we know that means it's, too rebellious. And can't have that. And Lucy Gray's also leaving behind her guitar and her mother's dresses for Maud Ivory since she won't need them in the wild. And this makes Coriolanus realize, like, oh yeah, I'm not the only one giving up on my dreams. Yeah, no shit. Oh. And I know that it's really easy to get, like, wrapped up in your own worries, especially when you're a teenager and your brain isn't fully developed to think everything through. But Corio is really self-absorbed to an annoying degree. At least for me. I mean, I'm obviously very biased toward Lucy Gray, but seeing what he does later in this chapter, I think my feelings are justified. Anyway, so they decide to head to the lake first before going north, since Lucy Gray wants to see it one more time. And I'm going to start reading this session on page 492. Lucy Gray gazed back at the town, although the only thing Coriolanus could make out was the gallows. Goodbye, District 12. Goodbye, Hanging Tree and Hunger Games and Mayor Lip. Someday something will kill me, but it won't be you. She turned and headed deeper into the woods. Not much to miss, agreed Coriolanus. I'll miss the music and my pretty birds, said Lucy Gray with a catch in her voice. I'm hoping one day they can follow me, though. You know what I won't miss? People, Coriolanus replied. Except for a handful. They're mostly awful if you think about it. People aren't so bad, really, she said. It's what the world does to them. Like us, in the arena, we did things in there we'd never have considered if they'd just left us alone. I don't know. I killed Mayfair and there was no arena in sight, he said. But only to save me, she thought it over. I think there's a natural goodness built into human beings. You know, when you've stepped across the line into evil, and it's your life's challenge to try and stay on the right side of that line. Sometimes there are tough decisions. He'd been making them all summer. I know that, of course I do. I'm a victor, she said ruefully. It'd be nice in my new life not to have to kill anyone else. I'm with you there. 3 seems enough for one lifetime, and certainly enough for one summer. So once again, they show their different views on people in the world, and personally I'm on Lucy Gray's side for her views, obviously. I mean, because ultimately we as individuals, we do get to make choices, but the environment we're in, like, does have a big influence on us, and I do believe, like, at people's core, like, overall, they are good people. And I'm just saying, if those in power, like, the capital actually took care of its citizens and gave them a better quality of life, they wouldn't have the need to rebel and quote-unquote cause trouble, because, how dare they want to have their basic needs for quality of life met. Anyway, after that conversation, Coriolanus goes to get a walking stick for them since they don't have any weapons, and he hears an animal crying out off in the distance. Then Coriolanus realizes that he slipped when Lucy Gray asked who the third person was that he killed. Because remember, she only knows about Mayfair and Bobbin, and, she would hate him if she knew he was also responsible for Sejanus' death. Also, when she asked the question, it caught him off guard, and he ended up driving a piece of bark under his nail. So he tries to distract her by asking if she can pull the splinter out. It doesn't work because she asks again. So Corio tries to BS his way out of this by saying that he killed the quote-unquote old him or whatever, trying to sound somewhat romantic, I think. I don't know. Lucy Gray gets the splinter out of him. By the way, I like how in the first chapter of this book, he pricks his finger on a rose thorn from the Grand Mim, and then the last chapter gets a splinter from a tree. Anyway, the moment passes and the conversation ends. They don't speak again for a while, and at this point, I think Lucy Gray is now like getting suspicious at the very least. She's had to practice seeing past Billy's charming romantic bullshit. I doubt she'll easily believe Coriolanus now. They briefly talk about how long it'll take for people to notice that they're missing, and then they keep walking, lost in thought. Once again, Coriolanus is spiraling, and I'll read his thoughts to you. This starts at the bottom of page 494. They hiked on toward the lake, each lost in their own thoughts. It all seemed unreal to him, as if this were just a pleasure outing, as the one 2 Sundays ago had been. As if they were going for a picnic, and he must be sure to get back in time for fried bologna and curfew. But no, when they reached the lake, they'd move on to the wilderness, to a life consumed with the most basic type of survival. How would they eat? Where would they live? And what on earth would they do with themselves when the challenges of obtaining food and shelter had been met? Her with no music, him with no school or military or anything. Have a family? It seemed too bleak an existence to condemn a child to. Any child, let alone one of his own. What was there to aspire to once wealth, fame, and power had been eliminated? Was the goal of survival further survival and nothing more? So yeah, Coriolanus clearly doesn't know how to exist in a non-capitalistic society where he doesn't make money or gain power. He's not, because Coriolanus isn't an addict like Highbottom is. He's not an alcoholic, but I'm pretty sure he's addicted to just wanting to be a productive member of society, never relaxing. I doubt he ever takes vacation, especially as president, or he never truly relaxes. He's always doing something. So yeah, he can't handle living out in the woods very well. So anyway, they get to the lake and decide to start fishing. Lucy Gray catches 2 fish, Corio catches 0. Which I think is funny. Then toward the bottom of page 495, we get a wonderful glimpse into Coriolanus' very narcissistic thoughts. This was his life now, digging for worms and being at the mercy of the weather, elemental, like an animal. He knew this would be easier if he wasn't such an exceptional person, the best and brightest humanity had to offer, the youngest to pass the officer candidate test. If he'd been useless and stupid, the loss of civilization would not have hollowed out his inside in this manner. He'd have taken it in stride. Again, I'm not a psychologist or any kind of mental health expert. I don't have the education or the training, but does this not scream narcissism? Also, everyone inherently has worth no matter who they are. It doesn't matter how quote-unquote useful you're deemed by Coriolanus' shitty standards. Everyone has worth. Anyway, putting my soapbox away for now, they go into the one cabin that's still standing so that they can start a fire to cook the fish since it just started to rain. And Coriolanus is growing more bitter by the minute since he's realizing this is his life now and he won't be able to go back to a fulfilling future, or his version of a fulfilling future. When Coriolanus closes the door behind him, he notices that it had been hiding something. It's a shotgun, but not just any shotgun. Coriolanus finds more weapons hidden, and the weapons Sejanus had purchased that night in the shed, including the murder weapons. Dun dun dun! So, normally I don't take a break in the middle of a chapter, but I will here because we're covering less material than we normally do, and plus it's my podcast. I can take a break when I want to. So when we come back, we'll talk about everything that happens after this. Hey guys, it's Alyson at a different point in time, and it's time for another random recommendation. So this week for the first recommendation, I'm going to recommend a YA series. It's pretty well known back in the day. It's not super obscure, but it's a little bit older, and if you never had the you never got around to reading it, I highly recommend it. It's the Gone series by Michael Grant. I'm going to read the summary on the book, of the first book, obviously. In the blink of an eye, everyone disappears, gone. Except for the young, teens, middle schoolers, toddlers, but not a single adult. No teachers, no cops, no doctors, no parents. And just as suddenly, there are no phones, no internet, no television, no way to figure out what's happened, and no way to get help. Hunger threatens, bullies rule, a sinister creature looks, animals are mutating, and the teens themselves are changing, developing new talents, unimaginable, dangerous, deadly powers that grow stronger by the day. It's a terrifying new world, sides are being chosen, a fight is shaping up, townies against rich kids, bullies against the weak, powerful against powerless, and time is running out. On your birthday, you will disappear just like everyone else. So yeah, there are 6 books in this series total, and I know there are like a sequel trilogy that came out a little while ago, but I haven't read those. I've only read the original trilogy. Like guys, I have the original like hardbacks with not the new covers, with the old ones with like just the people staring off into the wind in the distance. And yeah, if you want like a YA series with like an ensemble cast of all these kids with superpowers, I really recommend this series. There's an Annabeth-like character, you know, super smart, blonde main female character. So there's that. But yeah, that's my first recommendation. So back to the show. Okay, we're back. Where were we? Okay, so at this point, Lucy Gray still hasn't seen the weapons. She's still preoccupied with starting a fire to cook the fish. Coriolanus wonders how the weapons got there, but then quickly realizes that Spruce must have hidden them there before getting captured. And because he would know better than to hide them in District 12. Plus, he and Billy had been friends, so Billy could have easily shown him the lake house. And as soon as Coriolanus comes to this conclusion, that's when Lucy Gray does finally see the weapons. And this is when I think Lucy Gray like starts to put the pieces together. She knows those are the murder weapons, and knows that, you know, once they're disposed of, then there's nothing else linking Corio to the murder, and he no longer has a reason to run away. And she's already suspicious of him at this point because of that slip he made when he stupidly said 3 murders is enough for me. But, you know, she acts casually about this moment because she's a smart cookie. And she also plays dumb by saying, like, oh, are those the murder weapons from the shed? I think she already knows those are the weapons. She's just, again, playing dumb and wants to hear Coriolanus confirm it himself, which he does. Coriolanus asks them if they should bring the weapons with them, but she says no because she doesn't trust them. And I'm going to read this bit of dialogue at the bottom of page 497. For no reason other than this is the last time Lucy Gray speaks. So starting with the line, Lucy Gray says, "Oh, are these the ones they had in the shed?" "I think they must be," he said. "Should we take the guns along?" Lucy Gray drew back, rose to her feet, and considered them for a long moment. "Rather not. I don't trust them. These will come in handy, though." She pulled out a long knife, turning the blade over in her hand. "I think I'll go dig up some Katniss, since we've got the fire going anyway. There's a good patch by the lake." "I thought they weren't ready," he said. 2 weeks can make a lot of difference," she said. "It's still raining," he objected. "You'll get soaked." She laughed. "Well, I'm not made of sugar." So I think that Lucy Gray's last word is really important, and it's very telling that this is the last thing she tells us. So she almost always puts on, you know, her songbird persona because, again, she's a performer, and it's not a complete, like, you know, lie or deception. I think it is really part of who she is, but that's not her whole personality. You know, she's more than just her performance. she's a lot tougher and smarter than people give her credit for, and people underestimate her. So again, I just love that her last line in the book is just another subtle reminder that we don't necessarily know Lucy Gray fully. And anyway, she goes to gather some Katniss, and Coriolanus is left alone with his thoughts. So he's obviously very overjoyed that the murder weapon he used is here and not being studied in a lab, because, like I said earlier, it's the best evidence linking him to the murder. All he has to do is destroy the weapon, and then he can go to District 2, just like that, and nothing left to link him to the murder. Except for Lucy Gray, the one witness left. So, this next part of the book, I think almost everyone who's read it considers it the best scene, and probably the one we're all looking forward to most, seeing brought to life on screen. And I'll get more to that in a bit, but first I want to read this passage starting on page 498. It's right after he realizes Lucy Gray can still link him to the murder. Well, no matter. She would never tell. She wouldn't be thrilled, obviously, when he told her that there had been a change of plans, that he was returning to the Peacekeepers and heading to District 2 tomorrow at dawn, essentially leaving her to her fate. Still, she'd never rat him out. It wasn't her style, and it would implicate her in the murders as well. It would mean she could wind up dead, and as the Hunger Games had shown, Lucy Gray possessed an extraordinary talent for self-preservation. Plus, she loved him. She said so last night in the song. Even more, she trusted him. Although if he ditched her in the woods to claw out an existence alone, no doubt she would consider that a breach of faith. He had to think of just the right way to break the news. But what would that be? I love you deeply, but I love officer school more. That wasn't going to go over well. And he did love her. He did. It was just that only a few hours into this new life in the wilderness, he knew he hated it. The heat and the worms and those birds yakking nonstop. She was certainly taking a long time with those potatoes. First of all, I could have told you from the beginning, Corio, that you wouldn't enjoy living in the wilderness, nor last very long doing so. And second, how dare you have so little trust in Lucy Gray? Anyway, I'm going to keep reading. She hadn't wanted to go by herself. Too lonely. Her song said that she needed, loved, and trusted him. But would she forgive him, even if he deserted her? Billy Tope had crossed her, and he'd ended up dead. He could hear him now. Makes me sick how you're playing those kids. Poor Lucy Gray, poor lamb. And seeing her sinking her teeth into his hand, he thought about how coolly she'd killed in the arena. First that frail little Wovie, that was a cold-blooded move if he'd ever seen one. Then the calculated ways she'd taken out Treach, baiting him to attack her. Really, so she could whip that snake out of her pocket. And she claimed that Reaper had rabies, that it was a mercy kill, but who knew? No, Lucy Gray was no lamb. She was not made of sugar. She was a victor. This passage makes me so angry. I just think the fact that you so quickly turn on her the second you perceive her to be standing in your way says more about you than her, Corio. Also, he completely twists and warps Lucy Gray's actions. So, first, he judges her for literally defending herself from Billy when he attacked her. Calls the way she killed Wovie a quote-unquote cold-blooded move because, apparently Corio has selective amnesia because he's literally the one who told her to use rat poison. And also, Lucy Gray claims that, when she left the poison water bottle lying around, she was aiming for Coral, but Wovie just happened to be the one who got to it first. And, it's the Hunger Games. You were the one who wanted her to survive. Then Coriolanus claims that she had calculated the way she killed Treach. Personally, I read it as self-defense, spur of the moment thing, but whatever. I'm pretty sure Coriolanus killing Mayfair could also be considered quote-unquote calculated, but I guess it's okay when you do it, but not when Lucy Gray does it. Because, if Lucy Gray putting a poisonous snake on Treach so he wouldn't kill her is calculated, then so is your calculated decision to kill Mayfair so she wouldn't get you executed, Corio. Anyway, we all know he's a narcissist with double standards. So, Coriolanus, make sure the rifle is loaded before going outside. He goes toward the spot where Clerk Carmine had found the Katniss plant during the last trip, and it becomes clear that Lucy Gray is hiding from him. And again, this whole scene is so good, and I'm going to try really hard not to just, read the whole rest of the chapter out loud. I'm not an audiobook narrator. I couldn't do it justice. Just go listen to the official audiobook. Anyway, it's clear Lucy Gray is hiding, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out why. Coriolanus is sure that she's figured out the truth about, who really betrayed Sejanus, and he also is coming out with a loaded gun, so not a good look for him. Still, he calls out to her saying, I just want to talk. Thinks that her plan now is to just hide until he leaves, but that doesn't work for him because, she went back to 12 and the mayor manages to get her arrested. She could confess while being interrogated. Their whole history would come out. There could be some kind of trial. Highbottom could be brought in as a witness, and, he would not work in Corio's favor. So either way, he can't risk it, so he needs to find her. He goes back to the house and manages to find tracks to follow, and they lead him back into the woods. Also, I don't know why, but every time I think of this scene, I think it takes place at night, when in reality, it's actually the middle of the day. Does anyone else have the same problem? Just me? But yeah, no, not nighttime, just in overcast, giving a not ideal visibility in the woods. So still kind of a creepy atmosphere, so I think it fits the scene. Anyway, Coriolanus sees a patch of orange, aka the scarf, so he thinks he's found Lucy Gray. Psych! It's only the scarf laying across some briars. He leans down to pick it up, and surprise! There's a snake, and it bites him in the arm. And now the snake is my favorite character in the book. Congratulations, random snake. And even better, it gets away, so yay, the snake lives. Coriolanus realizes that this was a trap that Lucy Gray had set up and is now convinced she tried to kill him. Spoiler alert, the snake is not poisonous, so not Lucy Gray. Start over, Alyson. Spoiler alert, the snake is not poisonous, so Coriolanus is just being dramatic as usual. He also has a line where he says he's beginning to sympathize with Billy Tope, so that's how you know he's now truly a baddie. Also, there's the chilling line that's probably one of the most famous lines in the book on page 502 that says, if he'd felt better, he'd have laughed at the irony of how quickly their relationship had deteriorated into their own private Hunger Games. God, I love Suzanne's writing. Have I made that obvious by now? So, Coriolanus can't track Lucy Gray now, but he figures that she wouldn't go far because she'd want to see if her plan worked and, if it killed him. Personally, I don't think she was trying to kill him with the snake because I think she knows which ones are poisonous. I think that she had figured out that Coriolanus, essentially killed Sejanus, and now is worried for her own life, and rightfully so. And so she set this trap as a sort of test to see how he'd react. I don't know, it's hard to say because we don't hear from Lucy Gray ever again, and we're getting all this, filtered through Coriolanus, and he's not exactly the most reliable narrator. Anyway, so Coriolanus figures out that she's going back to the house in order to get a weapon because she's, not going to fight someone with a rifle when she only has a knife. Personally, if I was in her situation, I'd be taking off by now. He hears movement heading back to the lake and thinks it's her. He follows it. He charges through the branches to the spot where he thinks she is, but there's no sign of her. So, he calls out to her and says stuff like, hey, we can work something out, but, he doesn't mean it. Luckily, Lucy Gray doesn't buy his bullshit, and suddenly we hear her singing a verse of the Hanging Tree. specifically the verse where it has that line about the necklace of rope, just to rub it in that she knows about what he did to Sejanus. But then a bunch of mockingjays start copying the song, and the whole forest is filled with birds singing the hanging tree, so now all the noise covers Lucy Gray. The woods came alive with their melody as dozens joined in. He dove through the trees and then opened fire on the spot the voice had come from. Had he hit her? He couldn't tell, because the bird song filled his ears, disorienting him. Little black specks swam in the field of his visions. His arm began to throb. "Lucy Gray!" he bellowed in frustration. Clever, devious, deadly girl. She knew they'd cover for her. He lifted the rifle and machine gunned the trees, trying to wipe out the birds. Many fluttered into the sky, but the song had spread and the words were alive with it. "Lucy Gray! Lucy Gray!" Furious, he turned this way and that, and finally blasted the woods in a full circle, going around and around until his bullets were spent. He collapsed on the ground, dizzy and nauseous, as the woods exploded, every bird of every kind screaming its head off, while the mockingjays continued their rendition of the hanging tree. Nature gone mad, genes gone bad, chaos. I know that I keep saying things along the lines of, I can't wait to see this scene, or it'll be so cool to look at on screen, but this is probably my most anticipated one to see. Just like, Coriolanus screaming, firing the gun in all directions, and birds all around him, singing the hanging tree, and it's unclear if he hit Lucy Gray. And I've also read some interpretations of the scene where Coriolanus had essentially gone crazy and imagined Lucy Gray being there, and she was long gone, which, if they lean into that kind of insanity angle, it would be really cool. So either way, he gets back to the lake and disposes of the weapons by throwing it into the bottom of the lake, uses his father's compass to navigate his way back to base, and he makes it back and goes to the clinic and to treat the snake bite, and he's gonna be fine, unfortunately for us. Also, the medic doesn't really question the how or why he was bitten, because according to him, the rain brings out the snakes. Though the bite will leave a scar, and Coriolanus decides that it's a good thing because it'll serve as a reminder for him to be more careful in the future. So he's cleared and goes back to his bunk, and it's only mid-afternoon and his bunkmates haven't even gotten up yet, which is so crazy because it felt like we were in the forest for a long time. Like I said earlier, when I think of this scene, I have to remind myself that it didn't happen at night. But Smiley and crew haven't even had breakfast yet when Coriolanus tried to shoot Lucy Gray, and she may or may not have gotten away. We don't know. Anyway, Coriolanus goes to the bathroom, empties his pockets. Most of the stuff is ruined from the lake water. His mother's rose-scented powder was reduced to a nasty paste, and he has to throw it away, as well as photos. And basically only the compass survived. And this is a really important detail because it metaphorically shows Coriolanus's humanity kind of melting away. And now all he has left is the symbol of his father, and now he's going to embrace that. He's going to, officially become more like Crassus. And now he's truly on his way to becoming the ruthless monster we all know him as in the trilogy. And he also packs Sejanus' things so he can send it back to his family. That, would be considered the decent thing to do as Sejanus' quote-unquote best friend. Pretty awful friend. He says goodbye the next morning to his bunkmates and then goes on a hovercraft and takes a nap. So, after he gets on the hovercraft, dozes off, thinks about Lucy Gray, wondering where she is while the melody of the hanging tree is, stuck in his head, so good. Hope that haunts you forever. And he's woken up when an attendant tells him, "Hey, welcome to the Capitol," and naturally Coriolanus is confused but the lieutenant says that they have orders to drop him off there, so he's brought to the Citadel, and naturally Dr. Gall is there waiting for him in the lab, and she drops a mouse into a tank of golden snakes because why not? So Dr. Gall tells Coriolanus that she got his letter and his Jabberjay, so, this is confirmation that he definitely betrayed Sejanus, so yay. And they have a really important conversation, so I'm just going to read from there to the end of the chapter because it just kind of sums up everything. So starts on page 508 on Dr. Gall's line. "I got your letter," she said, "and your Jabberjay. Too bad about young Plinth. Although, is it really? Anyway, I was pleased to see you were continuing your studies in 12, developing your worldview." He felt himself pulled right back into the old tutorial with her, as if nothing had happened. Yes, it was eye-opening. I thought about all the things we discussed. Chaos, control, and the contract. The 3 C's. "Did you think about the Hunger Games?" she asked. The day we met, Casca asked you what their purpose was, and you gave the stock answer. To punish the districts. Would you change that now? Coriolanus remembered the conversation he'd had with Sejanus as they unpacked his duffel. "I'd elaborate on it. They're not just to punish the districts. They're part of the eternal war. Each one is its own battle. One we can hold in the palm of our hand instead of waging a real war that could get out of our control." She swung a mouse away from the gaping mouth. "You there, don't be greedy. And they're a reminder of what we did to each other, what we have the potential to do again because of who we are," he continued. And who are we? Did you determine?" she asked. "Creatures who need the capital to survive." He couldn't help getting in a dig. "It's all pointless, though, The Hunger Games, no one in 12 even watches it, except for the reaping. We didn't even have a working television on base." "Well, that could be a problem in the future. It's a blessing this year, given that I've had to erase the whole mess," said Dr. Gall. "It was a mistake getting the students mixed up in it, especially when they started dropping like flies. Presented the capital as far too vulnerable." "You erased it?" he asked. "Every last copy gone, never to be aired again," she grinned. I've a master in the vault, of course, but that's just for my own amusement." He was glad about the erasure. It was just one more way to eliminate Lucy Gray from the world. The capital would forget her. The districts barely knew her, and District 12 had never accepted her as one of their own. In a few years there would be a vague memory that a girl had once sung in the arena, and then that would be forgotten too. "Goodbye, Lucy Gray. We hardly knew you." "Not a total loss. I think we'll bring Flickerman back next year, and your idea about the betting is a keeper," she said. "You need to somehow make the viewing mandatory. No one in 12 will tune into something that depressing by choice," he told her. "They spend what little free time they have drinking to forget the rest of their lives." Dr. Gall chuckled. "It seems you've learned a lot on your summer vacation, Mr. Snow." "Vacation?" he said, perplexed. Well, what were you going to do here? Laze around in the capital, combing out your curls? I thought a summer with the peacekeepers would be far more educational." She took in the confusion on his face. "You don't think I've invested all this time in you to hand you off to those imbeciles in the districts, do you?" I don't understand. I was told," he began. She cut him off. "I've ordered you an honorable discharge, effective immediately. You're to study under me at the university." "The university? Here in the capital?" he said in surprise. She dropped one last mouse into the tank. "Classes start Thursday." So yeah, like I said earlier, Coriolanus going to be a peacekeeper, Gall basically planned this. She wasn't going to let him get away, essentially. And, he basically has spelled out to Gall what he's been thinking the whole time, that the Hunger Games are necessary to help maintain control, to remind people what they're capable of and why they can't relive war. All this in the name of keeping in order and control because he's terrified of chaos. And also, I'm really upset about the fact that they're erasing Lucy Gray. And I wonder, because we know in District 12 that they know that there was a victor before Haymitch, because Katniss mentions it, but in her narration she doesn't say the victor's name. So, like, do people know the name Lucy Gray? Like, does anyone know the story, or do they just not think about it at all, or do they just not talk about it because no one knows what happened? Like, what is I don't know. Point is, I'm upset about it. Although I do like the idea that like every time someone from District 12 has won the Hunger Games, it's caused problems for the Capitol in some way, and it usually happens on what should be like a significant year for the Hunger Games, because the 10th anniversary Hunger Games was a big deal. It was the first time they tried the mentor program, first time they tried the betting system, and Lucy Gray won, District 12 won, but then it ended up, making the Capitol look bad, so they had to erase it. And then Haymitch won the 50th games, and Quarter Quell is obviously a very big deal. But the way he won his games was controversial, make the Capitol look stupid, so then they essentially erased it, sort of, because I'm pretty sure Katniss in Catching Fire mentioned something about not ever seeing Haymitch's games. Like, they never showed reruns of the games, just like they never showed reruns of Lucy Gray's games. And I mean, 74th year, technically, like, not a big deal, but Katniss and PETA obviously made it a very big deal. And then next year was the 75th, another Quarter Quell, where because of District 12, things do not go according to plan. So I love the reoccurring theme of victors from District 12 messing up the status quo. Okay. Anyway, we're going to take one more break, and then when we come back, we will talk about the epilogue. All right, time for another random recommendation. This is another book that, when it came out, it was pretty popular, and I mean, the author is still pretty well known, but instead of a YA series, this is a historical fiction novel, and it is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I know he had a book come out, was it either late last year or earlier this year? I can't remember. Either way, it's on my TBR. I need to read it, and this was the book that really made me like re-fall in love with historical fiction when I first read it. So I'll just read the summary. Marie-Laure lives with her father in Paris near the Museum of Natural History, where he works as the master of its thousands of locks. When she is 6, Marie goes blind, and her father builds a perfect miniature of their neighborhood so she can memorize it by touch and navigate her way home. When she is 12, the Nazis occupy Paris, and father and daughter flee to the walled citadel of Saint Malo, where Marie's reclusive great-uncle lives in a tall house by the sea. With them, they carry what might be the museum's most valuable and dangerous jewel. In a mining town in Germany, orphan Winner grows up with his younger sister, enchanted by a crude radio they find. Werner becomes an expert at building and fixing these crucial new instruments, a talent that wins him a place at the brutal academy for Hitler Youth, then a special assignment to track the resistance. More and more aware of the human cost of his intelligence, Werner travels through the heart of the war and family into Saint Malo, where his story and Marie-Laure's converge. Yeah, it's been a while since I read this. It's been like 5 or 6 years. When did this book come out? 2014. Okay, wow. Yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, like, I mean, this book won the Pulitzer Prize, so that should say something. And yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a good start if you want to get into historical fiction. And with that being said, let's get back to the episode. All right, we're back. And we're here at the end. Yay! But I'm also sad it's the end. But it's also exciting because we'll get to talk about the trilogy, where Katniss will unknowingly help get some justice for Lucy Gray and Sejanus. Anyway, let's get started. So, when the epilogue opens, a couple months have passed. It's now October, and university students are halfway through the fall term, and there's a very important change in the narrative. So, Ballad is told in third person. We know that, obviously. And it's told from Coriolanus' point of view, and the narrator, calls him Coriolanus. Well, that's changed. Now the narration calls him Snow. So he's officially abandoned who he was at the beginning of the book. He's fully committed to becoming, the heartless monster we all know and love to hate. So Snow is leaving the University Science Center wearing a shiny new suit. He wants to look as impressive and intimidating as possible so he can drive his rivals crazy. So Snow's having a pretty good day. He just finished a special honors class in military strategy with Dr. Gall. Sounds like an awful day to me, but clearly me and Snow are very different people. Anyway, Snow also has a game maker internship. Earlier that morning, he'd been at the Citadel with other game makers, working out ways to engage the districts and the capital for the next Hunger Games. Snow pitched the idea that, a win for a tribute should be a win for their whole district, because it's the best way to get people more engaged with the games, because, as we know, games gotta stay relevant. So they come up with the idea that when a tribute wins the games, everyone in their districts would get food. So Snow also came up with the idea for the Victor's Village, and we all know that becomes a thing in the future. And basically, the goal for all these prizes for victors is to encourage more competitive and stronger tributes, aka the future careers, to volunteer, because that makes the games even more entertaining. And then we learned that the Plinths have unofficially adopted Snow, and he's now basically Mr. Plinth's designated heir. Because, being 18, he's too old to be officially adopted, but this works out for him because he'd never want to give up the name Snow, especially, if that meant taking the name of someone from the districts. So shortly after Snow comes back from 12, that's when the two families merge. Mr. Plinth buys the Snows apartment so they don't have to move. So, yay, you accomplished your goal of keeping your home at the beginning of the book. They also buy the Doolittle's place below them so Mr. and Mrs. Plinth can move in. Mrs. Plinth comes by daily to help with the grandmam, who begrudgingly accepted her as their new maid, quote unquote. But, I don't know, I think she might be slowly warming up to Mrs. Plinth. Could be wrong about that, but I could also see that happening. But at least Tigress gets along with her great, so at least Mrs. Plinth has one genuine friend within her new quote-unquote family. Mrs. Plinth, of course, loves Corio. He and Mr. Plinth weirdly get along and are kind of compatible in, surrogate father-son relationship. Snow even says that he can almost forget Mr. Plinth's district, which is a pretty huge compliment coming from him. So now the Plinths, they take care of them financially. They pay the property taxes and give Snow a generous allowance, which he uses to buy a lot of fancy clothes now, apparently. So on this particular day, when the epilogue is taking place, it would have been Sejanus' 19th birthday. Insert crying here. And that night they're having a quiet dinner to remember him. Festus and Lysistrata were invited. Glad they're still alive and thriving, though I wonder how long they last, since, as we know from Finnick's testimony in Mockingjay, being friends with Coriolanus Snow can be a hazard. And Snow does plan on giving the box of Sejanus' stuff to his parents that night. But before he does, he has something important to do before going to dinner. What is this errand he has to do before going home, you ask? It's seeing Highbottom at the academy. This won't end well. Snow asks for his mother's compact back since there's no reason Highbottom would need to hang on to it. He also gives Highbottom Sejanus's diploma since it would look bad for a capital trader to have one. So he puts a photo of the Plint family in the frame where the diploma once was, and then Snow swept 3 medicine bottles into the trash can. I'm sure that's not important. Then we get some really important history. So Snow finally confronts Highbottom about, his history with his father and the creation of the Hunger Games. So Highbottom was the one who came up with the idea while taking Dr. Gall's class while they were at university, a class he was failing since he hated Gall and, didn't want to participate. Highbottom also paired with Crassus for the final project because, they're best friends. Friends do that. The assignment was to create a punishment for one's enemies so extreme they could never forget how they wronged you. Highbottom and Crassus got drunk, came up with the idea. Crassus, promised that, it was just a private joke, but Crassus wrote up the proposal without Highbottom's permission and handed it in. Highbottom was horrified once he was sober, and it was too late to stop his friend, and never forgave him. And then after the war, Gall pulled out Highbottom's proposal, and thus the Hunger Games became a thing. And that's the night he first tried morphling. And, he hoped it would phase out since it's so horrible, but, clearly underestimated how much Gall wanted to keep it going. So now just everything about Highbottom starts to really make sense. Why he hates Coriolanus so much, why he hates Gall. And, you understand he wasn't necessarily acting out of pure evil most of the time, but a lot of times out of guilt, I think, and just self-loathing and wanting to forget everything, which is really sad. However, he still bullied a child just because, he hated the child's father, so I guess that kind of makes Highbottom the Severus Snape of the Hunger Games universe. Sometimes I do wonder, had he maybe tried treating Coriolanus better, maybe things would have been different. I don't know. That's hard to say. I'd have to think about that. Right, so after that, I'm just gonna read the conversation they have and then the end, because there's only a couple pages left in the book, and why not? It's the end. So, it certainly supports her view of humanity, said Snow, especially using the children. And why is that? Asked Dean Highbottom. Because we credit them with innocence, and if the most innocent among us turn to killers in the Hunger Games, what does that say? That our essential nature is violence, Snow explained. Self-destructive, Dean Highbottom murmured. Snow remembered Pluribus's account of his father's falling out with Dean Highbottom and quoted the letter. Like moths to a flame, the dean's eyes narrowed, but Snow only smiled and said, "But of course you're testing me. You know her far better than I do." "I'm not so sure." Dean Highbottom traced the silver rose on the compact with a finger. "So what did she say when you told her you were leaving?" "Dr. Gall?" Snow asked. "Your little songbird," the dean said. "When you left 12, was she sad to see you go?" "I expect it made us both a little sad." Snow pocketed the compact and gathered Sejanus's things. "I'd better go. We have a new living room set being delivered, and I promised my cousin I'd be there to oversee the movers." "Off you go then," said Dean Highbottom, back to the penthouse. Snow did not care to talk about Lucy Gray with anyone, particularly not Dean Highbottom. Smiley had sent him a letter at the old Plint's address, mentioning her disappearance. Everybody thought the mayor had killed her, but they couldn't prove it. As to the covey, a new commander had replaced Hoff, and his first move had been to outlaw the shows at the Hob because music caused trouble. Yes, thought Snow, it certainly does. Lucy Gray's fate was a mystery then, just like the little girl who shared her name in that maddening song. Was she alive? Dead? A ghost who haunted the wilderness? Perhaps no one would ever really know. No matter. Snow had been the ruination of them both. Poor Lucy Gray. Poor ghost girl singing away with her birds. Are you, coming to the tree, where I told you to run so we'd both be free? She could fly around District 12 all she liked, but she and her mockingjays could never harm him again. Sometimes he would remember a moment of sweetness and almost wish things had ended differently, but it would never have worked out between them, even if he'd stayed. They were simply too different, and he didn't like love, the way it made him feel stupid and vulnerable. If he ever married, he'd choose someone incapable of swaying his heart. Someone he hated, even, so they could never manipulate him the way Lucy Gray had. Never make him feel jealous, or weak. Livia Cardew would be perfect. He imagined the two of them, the President and the First Lady, presiding over the Hunger Games a few years from now. He'd continue the games, of course, when he ruled Panem. People would call him a tyrant, iron-fisted and cruel. But at least he would ensure survival for survival's sake, giving them a chance to evolve. What else could humanity hope for? Really, it should thank him. He passed Pluribus's nightclub and allowed himself a small smile. A person could get rat poison at any number of places, but he'd surreptitiously scooped up a pinch of it from the back alley last week and taken it home. It'd been tricky getting it into the morphling bottle, especially using gloves, but eventually he'd squeeze what he judged to be a sufficient dose through the opening. He'd taken the precaution of making sure the bottle was wiped clean. There was nothing to make Dean Highbottom suspicious of it when he'd pulled it from the trash and slipped it into his pocket. Nothing when he unscrewed the dropper and dripped the morphling onto his tongue, although he couldn't help hoping that as the Dean drew his final breath, he'd realize what so many others had realized when they challenged him, what all of Panem would know one day, what was inevitable. Snow lands on top. The end. Boom! Oh, I just slammed the book shut and Ray just sat up like, what are you doing? Sorry, Ray. And so, that's the end. Oh my god. So yeah, and just like that, Snow has officially poisoned his first victim. So the first in a very, very long line. And we don't know what happens to Lucy Gray. No, I do have like my own personal theories about what happened to Lucy Gray, but I'm gonna discuss all of that next week, for our wrap up and final thoughts with Gabby. So yeah, feel free to send any thoughts you'd have. We'd love to hear them for the episode. So we're not just, and it'll be exciting to have Gabby on, so you're not just hearing me talking to a void about all my final thoughts. Yeah, so don't forget to, follow, subscribe, so you get notified as soon as that episode drops, and follow on Instagram, of course. You can email me with thoughts, all in the show notes. I'm getting really tired, so I'm so sorry. Yeah, I hope all of you listening, you have a great day, night, whenever you're listening to this, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!